Alright, this is going to be a pretty long video probably. Um, this is going to be covering Nekroz in as much detail as I can, given my relatively developed but still very limited knowledge of the archetype. So Nekroz is a ritual deck. It's a deck that's gonna come out in February mainly for the TCG. Coincidentally, the set comes out on my birthday, apparently, which is pretty cool. And the lore is that um, it's the successor to Gishki as the ritual archetype, but um, also in that there's a clan of of um, of ritual related villages, I guess, who using a mirror or kaleidoscope, I don't know exactly what it is yet, kaleido mirror, using this thing, they're able to channel the spirits of dead synchros. And of course, even though by this point the ice barrier synchros are considered dead, they're all dead, all the synchros that previously took up the dual terminal lore, they're still considered legendary and very powerful. So they wear the dead synchros as armor. So you have here armor of Brionac, armor of Unicore, etc. And it's the various members of the clan, of which there are more than the two that I run. They adorn the armor of dead synchros and use them in battle, I guess. So it's pretty cool though. I'm not gonna lie. To see things like Brionac and Trishula come back in such an unconventional way is pretty cool. But the the reason why I'm gonna discuss them isn't for their lore, even if their lore is cool. It's just because the deck is very good. If you pay attention to the OCG, you will have observed that this deck dominates the OCG truly. Since its release, it it really does get a large number of, or a monopolistic number of tops and wins at events. Um, and even though the deck is not perfect both in its matchups and in terms of just how it plays in general, it is much more powerful than, well, not much more, but a distance better than every deck that currently exists in the TCG, which seems weird to think about because we think of something like Burning Abyss being a very, very good deck, and it's difficult to comprehend how something could just come in and be immediately better than that, but this deck really does just come in and and trounce everything. But I'll get on to all of that. The way the deck works is like before rituals have never really been able to be a competitive base for a deck. Uh, they tried with Gishkis, and Gishkis, um, I guess from a design standpoint, they aren't bad, but the main problems with rituals inherently are that rituals themselves don't do anything. Without their ritual spell, ritual monsters, I mean, they don't do anything. So they're just a -1 in your hand until you get the ritual spell, and then you use the ritual spell, and then it comes out. And the ritual spell is also a -1 until you get the monster, so you have to run a bunch of things to tutor either one, like the 1,000 hand and 10,000 hands. So it has inherent inconsistency. So even though ritual monsters have never been lacking for powerful effects, I would say. You look at things like Demise and Herald, either Herald really, and they aren't bad effects at all. If they were generic monsters, just regular effect monsters, then of course they would have a much more um, uh, what am I saying? They would be much more competitively viable, um, but because they're rituals, it creates logistical difficulties in terms of actually summoning them. So every Nekroz ritual has two effects basically. They have an effect in hand where you can discard them to do various things depending on the card, and there's an on not an on summon ritual effect, but there is a there's an on field effect. Like there's a ritual summon this card, and you will get whatever benefit. So it inherently solves the problem of ritual monsters being bad in hand because all of them have uses just being in your hand, without you having to ritual summon them. They're still useful. Um, so, for example, Necroz Armor or Brionac, its summoned effect is you can target one or two monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck, shuffle them into the deck, which is potentially a very useful effect. I mean, it doesn't really come up in the mirror at all, but against other matchups, things like Burning Abyss and Shaddoll, it's potentially a very useful effect. Um, but if it just had that effect, it would just be a level 6 vanilla in hand all the time. But it has another effect, which is you can discard this card, add one Nekroz monster from your deck to your hand, which is obviously a very good effect. So all of the Nekroz rituals have effects like that, I think. I'll just check that that Catastor does, because I actually don't know what Catastor does in hand. Yeah, so they all have discard to do something effects, which is pretty cool. And that is what makes the deck, it solves the problem of ritual monsters being bad. So that's why this deck isn't inherently bad, because it's a ritual deck. So as to why it is actually good, it's good because it isn't necessarily the most powerful deck that I have seen in my time playing this game. People compare the deck to Dragon Rulers, which I would say is fair in that this deck is just as good in its time compared to everything else as Dragon Ruler was. So Rulers was only really matched by Prophecy and arguably Evil Swarm, just in that Evil Swarm was the anti-Dragon Ruler deck. Likewise, this deck is so far beyond everything else, aside from Cliffort's, if Cliffort's main a bunch of floodgates, or Heroes, because Heroes' boss monster inherently hurts the deck. So yeah, Nekroz is much more powerful than every other deck, but it isn't as powerful as Rulers were, and even by comparison with how powerful Rulers were compared to everything else at the time, I wouldn't say Nekroz is more powerful than every other deck necessarily, but Nekroz is certainly the most flexible deck I think I've observed in a long time. It's very, very consistent. So like just reading some of their effects, you have essentially 12 of whatever you want. So it's very easy to commit to the field, very easy to make combos, and that's essentially what this deck tries to do. The deck is essentially uh, I would say a free-flowing combo deck, and the reason why I use the word free-flowing is because a lot of decks are able to um, shift cards from their hand onto the field with relative ease. You look at the decks that exist now, things like Burning Abyss, uh, Cliffort, and Shadow. They are able to like receive a hand and transfer that hand into board presence very quickly. It's very easy for Burning Abyss to swarm with a Dante or two. It's very easy for Shadow to create an OTK field, and even Clifforts. It's very easy for Clifforts to generate field presence, whether it's through a slower field presence in like just a Cliffort with a sack on it, or um, pushing into disc plays and stuff like that and pendulum plays. It's very easy for cards in hand to be transferred into cards on field, and this deck can likewise do that. However, this deck can also do a number of things. It can clear its own field. Like this deck can put um I'll it's like if you have 6 cards in your hand, it's easy to turn that into like 3 cards in hand, 3 cards on field. But this deck can make that again from 3 cards on field, 3 cards in hand to 6 cards in hand. And that fluidity with which you can just extend, attack, and then um, retract, I guess, to mitigate any overextension is really rather incredible, and it just allows you to manipulate your own game state, as well as that it has its own inherent forms of simplification that allow you to simplify their game state as well. So, what I would say about this deck, the biggest compliment that I could give this deck is that it can react to virtually any game state. Um, and that can't be said for every deck. There are decks where uh, if they have a bunch of things on the field, it will prevent you from doing things. Or if they have nothing on the field, it will prevent you from doing things. With this deck, you don't care really most of the time what board you're staring at. Um, just so long as there aren't any floodgates, which I'll get onto, any floodgates that particularly hinder you, of which there's only really emptiness and skill drain, and maybe mind drain. Um, so long as you aren't inhibited from playing the game, it doesn't matter what their field is. You can deal with it, which is really rather exceptional of a deck to be able to do. And even then, even if they do try to inhibit the way that you play in some way, there are only a handful of things that actually truly stop you from being able to play the game. Um, but that stuff we'll get onto later. So the way that the deck actually plays out is so it's split into the ritual monsters and the spells. So the spells, there are 3 of them in the OCG, and they will be in the TCG probably by the time that the whole archetype is released. Basically, there are like 3 cards released in Secrets of Evolution, I think is his OCG name. I don't know what his TCG name is. What his TCG name is going to be. Secrets of something. But the rest are released in the Hidden Arsenal equivalent. I don't know what it is called again. But yeah, basically most of them will be coming out in the equivalent of Hidden Arsenal, and a couple of things will be coming out before then in a a standard set. So yeah, there are 3 ritual spells that the OCG has access to. So the first one is Kaleido Mirror. Kaleido Mirror lets you ritual summon. All of them work conventionally in that you contribute a monster, although yeah, Kaleido Mirror is specific in that you can only tribute 1 monster, while Exo Mirror and Cycle let you tribute more than 1 monster. However, again, that will get discussed later because Shrit is cool. So they all have that, but then they all have an additional effect. So it's like you can tribute monsters, or in Kaleidomira's case, tribute one monster, or you can do this. And actually, in the case of Exomira, yeah, in the case of Exomira, it's and or, so you can do a combination of tribute any male monsters, or its other effect, or and or its other effect. So I mean, the exception to that is cycle. Cycle is tribute any number of monsters to special summon from your hand or your grave. Kaleidomira, but the rituals aren't just tribute one or any number of monsters to special summon a ritual monster from your hand. It's, or even advanced ritual art, which is like send from your grave, blah blah blah. They are like, you can do the conventional ritual way, or you can do a special way, or in the case of cycle, you pay the conventional cost to do it the conventional way or a separate way. So in Kaleidomira's case, you can either tribute a monster from your hand or field, or send one monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, whose level equals the total levels of the ritual monsters. But you can ritual summon any number of ritual monsters with Kaleidomira. So for those of you who immediately saw the video and you were like, why are you running all of this, all the synchros, it's because using Kaleidomira, you are able to summon really any number of things. I mean, not any number, but depending on the levels that you have in your hand and in your extra deck, you're able to potentially commit to the field. Mainly with Kaleidomira, you will send Herald of the Arclight, which is a synchro that came out in the last set, whatever that set was. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to the TCG for a while. But this card is there. So this card, for all intents and purposes, it just has the effect. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one ritual monster or ritual spell card from your deck to your hand. It's a level 4, so you'll use Kaleidomira, send Herald, get Unicore. And Unicore, for all intents and purposes, for now, it's just a 2300 vanilla, level 4. And then you'll use Herald to search, but you can also like send Quasar to drop a Unicore and the Valkyrus, send Star Eater to drop a Unicore and a Gungnir, drop Shooting Star to send a Unicore and a Brionac, or just send Barkion to get a Brionac. I mean, the specific synchros themselves don't matter because I don't run the Exabeetle Shooting Star combo or whatever, and I don't run any tuners or Miracle Synchro Fusion or anything like that. I just run what I run because of their levels, and you could run whatever alternatives you want. You could run like 5 God Dragon, Rainbow Neos, and whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is just that using Kaleidomira, you don't have to tribute. You can just send from the extra deck. Kaleidomira is your main ritual in the early game because going for the Unicore play allows you to create early game pressure. You commit to the field and you attack. You can do rank 4 plays and whatever, and then you'll use Valkyrus to clean up your field to not leave things on the field, which I'll get onto. But it lets you apply early game pressure while also letting you stabilize your own hand through Herald of Arclight. And this deck is already stupidly consistent, so you will ideally just commit a bit, swing, apply pressure, clear, and then have the setup for next turn, is the general idea. Kaleidomira is essential for that, but also late game you can potentially send one of the bigger synchros to go for a bigger play to swing for game type of thing. And you can do that in the early game as well, like if they maxi on the Kaleidomira, and you have, the Unicorn Valkyrus plays, you'll often just send the Shooting Quasar special 2, swing, and then tribute to draw 2. And I mean, that isn't amazing because you still go -1, but it's preferable to giving them a bunch of cards, unless you 100% have game, which is rare early game. But yeah, so that's what Collider Mirror does. With Exo Mirror, you can banish Necroz monsters from your grave instead of tributing from your hand. So it acts like I guess like a miracle fusion for rituals, so to speak. Very useful, especially in the mirror. Exo Mirror is probably the best of the ritual spells, um, which is why I run 3, although I'll get onto my individual decisions later when I go through the list. And Cycle lets you tribute conventionally, like you have to tribute Necroz monsters from your hand, but you can special summon a Necroz ritual monster from your grave instead of a Necroz ritual monster from your hand. So it can be very useful in getting things back from the grave, especially considering how many run-offs, how many one-offs I run. But the thing with all the ritual spells is that all of them say if you control no monsters, you can banish both this card and one Necroz monster from your graveyard, add one Necroz spell card from your deck to your hand. So all of them are able to tutor each other out, which is very, very good. Just because it means that you don't have to run as many Clausolas. Like the ritual spells all search themselves, and this deck is stupidly consistent. You have 12 of any monster because preparation of rites is very good. And then the ritual spells all search themselves, so yeah, you just have ridiculous levels of consistency. So in terms of plays that you can do, what I tend to do in the early game is just hold out until I'm able to safely drop Unicore and Valkyrus at the same time, which is quite often, but not all the time. You'll often need like a Shrit or an Archmage in order to get the right levels for Valkyrus. The reason why I insist on not committing to the field is because of Trishula. So Trishula, its ritual summon effect is you can banish one card from your opponent's side of the field, hand, and graveyard. So basically, a copy of the Trishula Synchros effect. This effect is obviously very powerful. So in the mirror, I don't want to allow them to use that effect, because the mirror, I find in the mirror generally, the most skilled player will win, or me, or I win. But it's very intricate, and I don't want to give them a leg up. I don't want to just give them a free Trishula resolution, and neither should anyone. Like that's just bad play. So it seems weird because I would say that Trishula is bad in the mirror, but I would say that it is bad in the mirror because it's easy to play around. However, that having been said, you have to play around it all the time, or else they just wreck you with Trishula. So because of that, Valkyrus is very useful. Valkyrus's on-field effect is during your main phase, you contribute 1 or 2 monsters from your hand or your side of the field, and if you do, draw 1 card for each card tributed. So what Valkyrus allows you to do is commit to the field. Like you can drop Senju and Unicore and Valkyrus, or just Unicore and Valkyrus. Swing for 5 to 6k, which is obviously, it isn't an OTK, but it's still a lot of pressure for the opponent to deal with. Forces them into using Valkyrus early on. Valkyrus's other effect is when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can banish 1 Necroz card from your graveyard, then discard this card, negate that attack, then end the battle phase. So it's also like a themed Swift Scarecrow. So it forces them into using their Valkyruses early on. And then afterwards, you can just clean up the field and draw 2. I mean, like, if you do commit a Senju and a Unicore, you would overlay into Emerald or something, shuffle 3 back into the deck, draw 1, use Valkyrus, tribute both, draw 2. So then you essentially trade 3 for 3. But But yeah, Valkyrus is very useful and that lets you play around Trishula. And I find that most of my early game plays revolve just as much around Valkyrus as they do around Unicore for that reason, because it allows you to play around their Trishula. But obviously it depends on the situation. It's impossible to say, like, if they go I don't know, like summon something. Like if they commit to the field and have a card engraved, then I'll just try and go into Trishula and Valkyrus really early on. But if they don't if they play it better, then like there are often times where I'll just draw an end, and that may seem bad, but it's not, because the deck has enough inherent defense for you to not die. It's all dependent on the situation. However, this deck allows you to create whatever situation you want, because it is so consistent and you can just search everything. You can search whatever you need in that given situation, which is why you can get away with running a bunch of one-offs that you may not run if the deck weren't so accommodating towards one-offs by the because of the fact that it is just so consistent. Like, you can search these particular things whenever you need them. So I don't know how else I could explain how the deck works. I mean, are there any other particular combos? Exomere is the ritual spell that you will use the most after the first turn. Kaleidomere is the one that you will use first turn, but the Exomere you will be using the most often, just because it is the best, really. It's very good. Yeah, I guess I'll just get onto the deck profile and explain what the cards do individually. So, Nekroz Armor of Brionac, as I've already said, you can discard it to add a Nekroz monster from your deck to your hand, and if it's on the field, you can discard this card. Sorry, if it's on the field, you can discard it. If it's on the field, you can target one or two monsters on the field that are special summoned from the extra deck, shuffle them into the deck, and each of the ritual monsters have the clause. You can only use the effect of X card once per turn. So basically, like, you can't drop a Trishula and then drop another Trishula and get the effects of both. It's just you can, and also all of them. This includes the ritual spells as well. It says you can only use them once per turn. So if any of the ritual spells were to get warninged, or scolding, I don't know, or if any of the ritual monsters' effects were to be negated, then you still couldn't use the effects, because you can only use this effect once per turn, meaning that if the activation is negated, you are still considered to have used the effect, rather than you can only activate this effect once per turn, in which case, if the activation is negated, you can activate it again. But that's more just a general Yu-Gi-Oh thing, rather than something that is specific to these cards. And I think that in some cases, so for this, it says, like, you can only use each effect once per turn. This one is, because this has a continuous effect, you can only use the discard effect once per turn. For Valkyrus, you can only use each effect once per turn, which is very important. I'll explain that later. Decisive Armor. Basically, all of them constitute that you can only use, like, you can use both effects in a turn. You can use the discard effect and whatever on-field effect they have once per turn, but you can only use their effects once per turn. So I can discard for Brionac and use its clear field effect in the same turn, but only once that turn. Yeah, so now that that's cleared up for the individual things. So you have Brionac, obviously. Then you have Unicore. So Unicore's discard effect is you can discard this card, then target one Necroz card in your graveyard, except itself, as in except Necroz Armor of Unicore. Add it to your hand, and its on-field effect is negate the effects of all face-up monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck. So uh, weirdly enough, you don't run it. Sorry, obviously you would run it for either of its effects, but its main use isn't its effect. Its main effect is just it allows you to apply pressure by being level 4, which in conjunction with Kaleido Mirror is very useful considering the levels of everything that you run. So yeah, it like you can go 4 plus 8 or 7 or 6, which lets you put a lot of pressure on the field, and 4 works with Herald of the Arclight. So and it's just a 2/3 beat, which is very useful. Its negate the effects of all face-up monsters on the field that are special summon from the extra deck is very useful, particularly against things like Burning Abyss, because then their Dantes can't beat over anything, which means that they just have to sit on 2/5 defense, which um, gives you more offensive momentum than they do. Like they they have defense, but they can't free flow, again for the use of that word, between defense and offense as easily as they normally could. And it's just useful against a bunch of things. And his discard effect is very useful because it means that like you'll want to keep Brionacs in the deck because later on in the game you would rather like be able to go preparation search Brionac to search everything else. You'd rather just have more Brionacs in the deck for as long as possible because Brionac teaches everything. So you can use Unicore to get like the first turn you will use a Brionac. There's no two ways about it. You're gonna use a Brionac most of the time. So you would rather use Unicore to get the Brionac to search something else rather than get the Brionac to search something else and have more Unicore. You run out of Unicores fairly quickly. It's it's a bit annoying because I would run like 5 Brionac, 5 Unicore if I could. And now in OCG there's only one Unicore, which is kind of crap. But yeah, Unicore, like all the 3-offs are obvious 3-offs. So Brionac and Unicore are obvious 3-offs. Then Valkyrus, if you don't run 3 Valkyrus, run 3 Valkyrus. I don't know what to say. Like it's the best card in the mirror. Its Scarecrow effect is very, very, very crucial in the mirror because otherwise the mirror would just be who OTKs who the quickest. But because Valkyrus exists, it isn't that way. So if they overextend and you have the Valkyrus, then you can punish them for it with Trishula and whatever, and then hit them next turn. But its tribute effect is very useful as well. It's very useful to stabilize your early game. It's very useful post side to draw into the things that you sided into. So Valkyrus is again a very, very, very useful card. One that for me is a very clear 3-off. So yeah, I again I don't really know what to say. It's very, very good in every sense. It's very, very good. Then one decisive armor. Decisive armor's effect is it's a level 10 3300 beat stick. During either player's turn, you can discard this card and target one Necroz monster you control. It gains 1000 attack and defense until the end of the turn. And then its on-field effect is you can target one set card your opponent controls, destroy it, and if you do, banish it. So, the pseudo-honest effect, although it's nowhere near as good as honest, but the discard to gain 1000 effect is the main reason why you run it. Just because it's necessary. Like it isn't something that you will often use if things are going your way, but quite often if you're in a troubling position, then decisive armor suddenly becomes very useful. So if they drop like a Majesty's Fiend or a Vanity's Fiend or something like that. Sorry, I mean Vanity's Fiend, because what would Majesty's Fiend do? If they drop a Vanity's Fiend or anything like that, just a big monster that you can't get rid of, then Decisive Armor is very useful. Decisive Armor is very useful in getting OTKs that you wouldn't be able to get, because yeah, you can do that extra 1k and people often don't see it coming. It's very useful in a defensive sense as well sometimes, but yeah, it's generally just for uh, times where you need it, and there are sometimes times where you need it, so therefore you kind of have to run it. But other than that, it is just good on its own. You know, dropping a 3/3 beat applies a lot of pressure. It's really big against matchups other than the mirror mainly, because you won't really resolve its effect or do much with it in the mirror. But yeah, it's big, run over things, and its target one set card, destroy and banish it effect is pretty useful as well. It's useful in combating things like skill drain just because it's a 3/3 beat. But yeah, it's a solid one-off again, because you can just search everything. You can search it, and it's a solid one-off. Then one Clausolas. The reason why the reason why I run one Clausolas is because I find that the worst hands are either when you just can't do anything, or when, sorry, yeah, obviously it's when you can't do anything, but it's either when you can't do anything because you have too many non-ritual things clumped together. So I mean, like, if you have like a bunch of these, and then all your defensive cards clumped together, then you can't do anything. But also if you have a bunch of ritual spells clump, if you double draw ritual spells, those types of hands are very bad as well. Clausolas is useful in getting 2 ritual spells early on, but because all of them can banish and search each other, once you resolve one ritual spell, really, you don't have to worry about finding another particular ritual spell after that, because they just search each other. So and often I'll Digesto it back into the deck anyway, and you have Unicore to get it back should you need it. So Clausolas isn't something that I think, certainly if you're running 3, you shouldn't be running 3. 2 is a decent number. I wouldn't argue against 2. If you want to run 2, then by all means. But I just wanted to reduce the number of cards in this deck as much as possible. I didn't want to run anything that I found to be unnecessary, and I found the second Clausolas to be kind of unnecessary. So yeah, I run one. And also its on-field effect. I mean, it's a level 3 with poor stats, but its effect is during either player's turn, you can target a monster on the field out a special summon from the extra deck. Its attack becomes 0, also its effects are negated, and that lasts until the end of the turn. Which is alright, but, you know, I'm not gonna write home about it. So, yeah. Then I run one Trishula and one Gungnir. So, the reason why I run one Trishula is because it really isn't that good in the mirror, just because its in-hand effect is something that you're rarely going to use, and its banishy effect is something that you will use to punish bad players, but against good players you're rarely going to actually resolve it. Against Rogue, you beat Rogue anyway, and it isn't that good against Clifford at all. So really, like, it's a one-off because I'll get it when I need it. Well, not even when I need it, because there's rarely a time where you actually need Trishula. But it turns a 70% game win into a 90% game win or something like that. It gives you an extra percentile in a game that you're probably already going to win, or in some cases allows you to make a comeback. But not so much that I would actually base the deck around it at all. Like, I know that there will be a lot of people running multiple Trishula, some even running 3 because the effect is powerful. However, the effect is not impossible to play around, especially for the mirror. I mean, everything else you should be being anyway. There's no deck that should be being this aside from Cliffort's, I guess, heroes maybe, and just anything specifically designed to beat the deck. Okay, fine, it can beat the deck. But Ceteris Paribus, this deck will be stronger than everything else, so you have no need for a super powerful effect. But even irrespective of that, it isn't useful in the mirror. The whole way that I built the main was just I want it to be as good as possible against the mirror, and then heavily side for everything else. It's why I don't run any MST in the main. It pretty much means that I instantly lose against Clifford as long as they have a floodgate up. Especially since I don't run any Book of Eclipse now, because I can't do any dodgy Book of Eclipse dodge skill drain plays. But to me that is a trade-off for a better mirror match, which is what I wanted to focus on mainly. So Trishula isn't that good in the mirror. It's something that you have to run, but I mean you could even get away with siding it potentially, but it is definitely good enough to main, but you barely resolve the 1 in a good mirror match. You could even side it out in the mirror match. So yeah, for me there's no reason to run more than 1. It's bad against Clifford. Well, it isn't bad against Clifford. To say it's bad against Clifford, to be like, why is it bad against Clifford? Like, it's bad in that nothing targets, and even aside from that, it doesn't help. It doesn't help if they have a floodgate up, if they have a skill drain or an emptiness. By that token, everything is bad though. But then post side, I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult to explain. But yeah, Trishula is good, but it isn't. It definitely isn't something that you would run to the degree that it becomes an inherent part of your strategy. It is something that you get when you need to, and if you need to, you drop it and resolve it. And even if you run 1, you can resolve more than 1 per game because of cycle and things like that. So yeah, there are often times where I'll resolve Trishula 2, or sometimes even 3 times a game, but you shouldn't need to. Like, you shouldn't need to resolve it even once most of the time, but often if the opponent puts you in a situation where you can resolve a Trishula, then yeah, you make the Trishula, and then you've won. Like, and again, that is hyperbole, but it's true in that it just isn't useful in the mirror, and against everything else you should be winning anyway, except for Clifford, and it doesn't help the Clifford situation that much. Then one Gungnir is sort of a counterpart to Trishula, so its in-hand effect is during either player's turn, you can discard this card, then target 1 Necroz monster you control. This turn it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, so it gives protection to a Necroz monster you control. And its other effect is, its on-field effect rather, is during either player's turn you can discard 1 Necroz card, then target 1 card on the field, destroy it. Gungnir is very, very good in the mirror late game. The reason why Gungnir is very good is because Valkyrus is ruled like Scarecrow in that Swift Scarecrow is ruled that if it cannot negate the attack, then it does not end the battle phase. So say I control a wind-up rabbit, I attack my opponent directly, they discard Swift Scarecrow, I chain wind-up rabbit's effect to banish it. Because the card is no longer on the field when Scarecrow attempts to resolve, the attack is not negated, therefore the battle phase does not end. And Valkyrus is ruled the same way, so because of that, basically if you negate the attack yourself, it cannot negate the attack. So what Gungnir can do is you attack with something, they discard Valkyrus, you chain Gungnir's on-field effect to destroy that card. Valkyrus cannot resolve. And players, I don't think people know that. I don't think it's a common thing because I see people not observing that particular trend very often. Like, say I swing for 6k in the early game, they'll take it, when really 4k and below is a boundary that you do not want to be in the mirror match, because it means that a potential Gungnir player could end you. So I try to stay above 4k in the mirror, really. If they attack for 4k in the early game, I will use the Valkyrus to stop it, just because the threat of Gungnir later on is too important. But yeah, people often let themselves go to 2k on the basis that they won't die, and then it's just like, alright, I'll drop Gungnir and anything attack in this game. Because like Valkyrus can only be used once per turn. They can't even chain another Valkyrus, even if they had it, which is itself unlikely. But yeah, for that reason, Gungnir is very, very useful in the Necroz mirror. Later on in the game, it's a pivotal one-off, I would say, just for that lone interaction of being able to stop Valkyrus, because Valkyrus itself is so important in the Necroz mirror. It's the deck's primary form of defense. But its effect is also useful. It helps in the Cliff War matchup, because if you manage to summon Gungnir, like, say they activate Skill Drain, you can chain Gungnir, kill the Skill Drain, or Scout, depending on whatever you need. And if they don't have the Skill Drain, then you can, pop Scout in their turn, type of thing. So it's definitely better than Trishula is in the Cliff War matchup, and it's just a pretty useful card in general. So yeah, Gungnir is definitely a valid one-off as well. And again, all of these things can be one-offs because they aren't things that are necessary to your strategy. I mean, they're necessary as one-offs, but they aren't things that you would ever want to see multiples of. And this deck just has such a vast toolboxing ability that you can just toolbox these cards whenever you need it. You can get that Gungnir when you want to make a late game push. Commonly, Kaleido Mirror, drop Star Eater, drop these two, which is the reason why I run Star Eater, is because that is a late game play in the mirror. You can toolbox, you can do whatever you want. So yeah, those are all the ritual monsters I run. The only ritual monster that I don't run is Catastor, just because Catastor isn't very good. Its discard effect is almost good, but like these guys can't be summoned off it, I don't think. And even if they were, like, I don't know, Catastor just isn't really that good. So then for the other Necroz monsters that aren't rituals, I run 2 Shrit and 1 Archmage. And I recently cut Dance Princess, and by recently I mean today I cut Dance Princess. So Shrit's effect is, if you ritual summon exactly one Necroz ritual monster, this card can be used as the entire tribute. So bear that in mind, because you can't go like Kaleido, tribute Shrit, special summon 2 things. It can only be for one ritual monster where you can use Shrit as the cost. But that means that Shrit can be used as the entire cost for any ritual spell to special summon any ritual monster. And again, because Exo Mirror lets you banish from the grave, like, you can banish a Shrit from the grave as the entire cost for a ritual summon. So it avoids you having to level manipulate your grave. You just go Exo Mirror, banish Shrit. And likewise, that means that Shrit can work very well in conjunction with just 2 ritual spells, because you'll go like any ritual spell, tribute Shrit, do whatever, use Exo Mirror, banish Shrit, and then Shrit effectively counted as 2 costs. But yeah. Yeah, so that's one of Shrit's effect. Then Shrit's other effect is, if this card is tributed by a card effect, you can add one warrior type Necroz ritual monster from your deck to your hand. So if you not only can you tribute Shrit as the entire tribute for a ritual summon, but you can also search a warrior Necroz ritual monster when you do, of which it is Brionac and Trishula and Clausolas. So Shrit is the build. Shrit is very useful because, well, no, I just explained why it is useful. It is a very useful card. The reason why I run 2 is because it sucks to double draw. It's like, if you have it in your hand authentically, it is very useful, but it isn't something that you need to have in your hand in order to make plays. It's a useful addition to whatever combos you already have. It just lets you perform better combos. However, it isn't essential to do any plays, and it sucks to double draw, and you can search it should you need it. So I think 2 is completely fine. It is something that could be ran at 3, but I think 2 is the perfect number for it. It is a very useful piece of support. And then sort of in place of the third Shrit, what am I saying? I run one Archmage. So what Archmage does is, if this card is tributed by a card effect, you can add one spellcaster type Necroz ritual monster from your deck to your hand. So the spellcasters are Unicore, Valkyrus, and Gungnir. Then its other effect is, if this card is banished, you can send one Nekroz monster from your deck to the graveyard except itself. And you can only use one effect per turn and only once that turn. So Archmage is kind of useful. I run Archmage firstly because there are times where you will want to search a spellcaster, mainly Valkyrus. And Archmage, like, it isn't something that you will search a lot, but if you happen to draw it, you will play your combos in a way so that it accommodates tributing Archmage so that you can get a search. And it's also useful to banish for Exo Mirror, because like, if you banish Archmage, you will send Shrit, which accommodates Exo Mirror plays later. That's the idea. So Archmage isn't like amazing, but it's a good one-off. It's a useful one-off because you can make plays with it that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. It lets you perform some weird combos, but mainly just to be able to search a spellcaster, because there are times where you will want to search a spellcaster, because the spellcasters are just as good as the rituals. Being able to search Unicore, Valkyrus, or Gungnir is often just as useful as being able to search Brionac. I mean, and that sounds weird, but because you can only use Brionac once a turn, like, there are times where you would want to tribute it and be able, like, if you've already used Brionac, which you probably will have, then you'll want to search one of the other things that Brionac would have searched, like Valkyrus or Unicore, than you would search a Brionac, so that you can use a Brionac next turn, because there might not be a next turn if you don't have the Valkyrus. So yeah, like, it isn't amazing, but it's flexible and adds variety, which is kind of useful. Yeah, it is useful in this deck. It's useful because, like, again, you don't need the third Shrit. It isn't something like Brionac, Unicore, or Valkyrus where you 100% need as many copies of it as you can. So you can afford to go for variety, and this is a combo deck, so you can have diverse plays. Also, I think that you have to main at least one normal summonable Necroz spellcaster, of which there are 2. It's either this or Dance Princess, because otherwise Secret Village of the spellcasters can get sided in the mirror, and then you lose. Like, that has happened to me a couple times back when I didn't play Archmage or Dance Princess, they would just like they would go first turn, you know, drop Unicore, activate Secret Village, and then I'm just like, well, GG. I can't do anything because the deck is all spells. At least if you have an Archmage in the deck, like you can go discard Brionac, search Archmage, summon Archmage, and then make plays so that you don't instantly lose the game. The reason why I don't run Dance Princess is because I found its effects to be really useful. So yeah, that's why I don't run that. Then I run 3 Senju and 3 Manju, kind of obvious. Very, very good cards. Then 3 Maxi. Maxi is very useful in the mirror. Shared Ride has the better effect, but Maxi can be used if you go second, and with this deck you'll choose to go second because firstly you can't do anything going first, but also because again this deck can respond to most game states, so it isn't like you need to go first in order to defend against a certain game state, but going second means you have more cards and you can attack, which are benefits that are too great for you to consider going first. So yeah, Maxi is good in the mirror. It's better than Shared Ride, just generally speaking. Although Shared Ride is still very good, and Maxi is good against other stuff as well, potentially. Like it saves you having to side it because you can just run it. And then 1 Tsukuyomi. So there's a card that I don't run, which I will show, which is Jin, Releaser of Rituals. So this card's effect is when you ritual summon a ritual monster, you can remove from play this card from your graveyard as one of the monsters required for the ritual summon. While the monster ritual summoned using this card is face up on the field, your opponent cannot special summon. So this is very, very powerful in that early game you can use this, bring out a ritual monster that has the Jin buff, and then the opponent can't special summon, and it's very, very difficult to deal with in the mirror because like it's just, oh, I can't special summon, blah, which sucks. And then that compared, what, this is also very useful in the late game. Sorry, I just woke up and did this video, so my brain just feels like shit. So this in the late game as well presents a floodgate that is very difficult to deal with in a simplified game state. It's very powerful. It puts the opponent on a clock, applies pressure, and just because of how this deck works, there's little defense in regards to removal or traps. It's unlikely that any sort of overextension will be punished in any meaningful way. So yeah, Jin is a very, very powerful card. However, the reason why I don't run it is because Jin fields generally in order to make a Jin field, you have to go -1 because it involves you making Revolved chain to send it to the grave. And Jin fields are very brittle. Like, they aren't difficult to deal with. The only thing is having a good enough number of outs so that you don't have to rely on drawing one card. Like, if I just ran, like, a Raigeki, then I would never draw the Raigeki, therefore I would lose. However, because I run, like, 6 outs, it isn't like I will not have an out. I will often have an out. And that was why I ran Book of Eclipse. Book of Eclipse is the cleanest out to a Jin field because it can't be stopped by either Trishula or Gungnir. However, the reason why I've omitted Book of Eclipse is because the badness came out, and I think that 2 Dark Hole and a Snatch Steal is in general more useful than the Book of Eclipse would be. But who knows, like, I could drop Tsukuyomi for a Book of Eclipse. Who's to say? But yeah, Jin is very, very powerful. So often I find that when people do commit into a Jin field, it's very, very easy, should you have an out, to destabilize that field, and then from there, it's very difficult for them to come back because they'll have way less cards compared to you, and it means that they have like they don't have a lower probability of having Valkyrus, but there's a lower risk of them having the Valkyrus. So because of that, you can commit, and you should be fine. And also, Jin is just very bad to draw. I found that when I did run it, I would constantly draw it, which almost seems reductive. It's like there are cards that I wouldn't not run because they're bad to draw, but in the case of this, it's like I wouldn't describe it as win more. There are people on my side of the argument who would describe it as win more, describe it as unnecessary. I wouldn't describe it as win more, but I would describe it as unnecessary because I find that this deck just wins enough without Jin for you to have to run Jin. And that is simply as it is for now. As it is for now, I assume that a lot of people will be running Jin. A lot of people will be basing their deck around Jin because they view it as a very powerful effect, which it is. It is a very powerful effect. But because of that, they will get punished because it may be powerful, but it isn't stable. It's brittle. So things like Dark Hole, Raigeki, Book, Snatch Steal, and Tsukuyomi are there to out the Jin fields. So the reason why I run Tsukuyomi is because originally I had 2 Book of Eclipse, and I didn't want to run the 3rd Book of Eclipse, but I wanted a utility monster, and nothing did the job until I put Tsukuyomi in, and Tsukuyomi was very good. So whether I keep the Tsukuyomi in, or go with the Book of Eclipse, or go somewhere completely different, I don't know at this point. However, for now, Tsukuyomi is very it's very useful for what it does because it is a level 4, so you can just normal summon it, set a random thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Jin ritual, but you can just set a monster they control, commit, and then overlay. Setting can just be very useful in general, but in the Jin instances is very useful, and it's something that it's a resource. It isn't something that you just use once. It's something that you can use more than once. So it turns your normal summon, like you can exchange your normal summon for the opportunity to set a card. Your normal summon effectively becomes a Book of Moon with an 1100 body. And the alternative options for that would be that they become one of these, which is a search, or post-side Denko Sekka, but I'll get onto that later. So Tsukuyomi is just there as an out to the Jin fields. I don't know if it will stay, but for now it is. In the testing that I have done, it is very useful, so for now it retains its place. Then on to the spells, 3 Preparation of Rites. Preparation of Rites is add to your hand 1 level 7 or lower ritual monster from your deck. So, Brionac, Preparation of Rites basically lets you add anything. And also, you can add to your hand 1 ritual spell card from your graveyard, so it's rather useful, because later on in the game you do sometimes run out of your ritual spells. It allows you to, basically sets up a ritual play for you, potentially, which is often very useful. Preparation of Rites is very, very good. Then 3 Kaleido Mirror, because it's the one that you will use most in the early game, so rather than having to search it, I would rather just draw it authentically. 3 Exo Mirror, because it's the best one and it's very useful in the mirror. So I ran 2, but when I ran 2 I found that I ran out of it, so I'd rather have 3. And then 1 Cycle, because it isn't something that you will use a lot, but like when it's there, you can get it if you need it, type of thing, and it is useful just as a 3rd Nekroz ritual. Then 2 Dark Hole and a Raigeki, because the ban list came out and I can, so it's something that I'm testing. I just figured that like Dark Hole and Snatch Steal are both outs to Jin plays, which was the main reason for me running Book of Eclipse, and against the mirror, I wouldn't set Book of Eclipse. The reason why I wouldn't set Book of Eclipse is because then I commit a card to the field, so if they drop Trishula, then like I'm going to lose cards. So I wouldn't set it. unless they already had a card on the field, or unless I didn't have a Valkyrus and I absolutely had to. I would just use it as a normal spell often in the instances that they did make a Jhin play. So because of that, I might as well run Dark Hole. And Dark Hole is, I wouldn't say more useful, because I think of the Clifford matchup, or just any deck that main skill drain in Book of Eclipse is very useful against skill drain based strategies, because you can resolve Trishula and Gungnir with kinky Book of Eclipse plays. But just in general, against other decks, Dark Hole is more useful than Book of Eclipse is. Book of Eclipse got sided out against basically everything other than the mirror, and even then in the mirror it would sometimes get sided out. So for now, like, Dark Hole and Snatch Steal are just better cards in general. So because of that, like, they fill the objective of needing sufficient outs to Jhin fields, but they're also just useful cards. So yeah, I'll see how that goes. It's the only limited testing that I've had with this build, really, because the banners came out very recently, but I think it should be fine. And then one Raigeki, one Book of Moon, and one Snatch Steal, because Snatch Steal is cool. Yeah, I mean, like, Snatch Steal, I guess, is the deepest out to a Jhin field. Like, if they make a Jhin play, because basically the way Jhin is ruled is that in the OCG it is always the opponent of the player who resolved Jhin. So say they, use Jhin to summon like a Valkyrus. If it's always the opponent of the player who summoned Valkyrus. However, in the TCG it is just the person who controls that monster. So if you Snatch Steal a Jhin monster, then not only can you special summon, but they can't special summon, and then at that point it's just brutal. And whether or not they search Gungnir or Trishula to protect it, you have an even number of outs for each. So you have 3 destruction ones, which Gungnir would protect from, and 3 target ones that Trishula would protect from. So yeah, it's interesting. That's why Book of Eclipse is the cleanest out, because it gets past both. But yeah, Snatch Steal, interesting. Then for the extra 2 Herald, because you don't need 3, but it is really good. So yeah, kind of do need 2. Barkion, because I have a dual terminal one and it looks cool. Basically all the synchros are just the ones that are the highest rarity that I have of their levels. So I have a DT Barkion, I have a Ghost Rare Shooting Star, I have a Ghost Rare Star Eater, I only have an Ultra Shooting Quasar, but I don't really know what other level 12 I would run. Plus for me it's like a nice set. I have the Shooting Star and the Shooting Quasar and the Star Eater. It's like an ascension. It's like, you start out as like a little thing, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I'm actually kind of cool, and then you're like, rah, I'm gonna do cool things. And you're like, oh, I'm eating stars and stuff. This one's just like, blah, I am the best. So yeah, it's kind of cool. I dropped the second level 12 for a level 11 because of the Gungnir Unicore play, which is useful. Oh yeah, some of these things have must be ritual summoned using by monsters other than monsters of its level, just so that you can't go like, say in Gungnir's case, like Kaleido Mirror, send a level 7 special, or like send a level 10 special Decisive Armor, send a level 8 special Valkyrus, or else I would run, more synchros, I guess, in my extra deck to be able to accommodate them. But because I can't. Yeah, that would essentially mean like they would activate their card. I would be able to use Typhoon from hand, and then Typhoon is just essentially another Twister, and I would chain it, and then if they chain something else, I have potentially MST or Twister to back that up as well. But and then other than that, like if I have to set it, then I have to set it. It's just the same as Twister, and just slightly worse than Dust Tornado. I don't like Fairy Wind in general because I've played Cliff Forts, so having played Cliff Forts, I know how to play around Fairy Wind. Like, you just activate Sax before you use the effect of Scout and stuff like that, and then it like Fairy Wind destroying everything is not always favorable. It is often really cool because, like, say they go like Emptiness or Skill Drain, you're like, cool, set Fairy Wind, end. But it isn't entirely preferable, and they can sometimes counter side trap stun, although I don't see why they would in this case. Like, I think simple outs are often best, so rather than going for the big out, I would rather go for the one that does its job, which is why I often go for Dust Tornado over Fairy Wind. And in this case, Typhoon is better than Fairy Wind because I'd rather use it on my turn. And the clause for them having 2 or more spell traps is regularly met. So yeah, Typhoon is a decent inclusion. And then the last thing is 1 TT, because going first, I will bring in a TT over. I mean, before it was I would swap Dark Hole for TT, and now I don't really know what it is, but I guess it'll probably be the same thing. TT is just useful going first against a number of things, and in the mirror, it's just a pretty good card to have. Like, I used to main TT, but the reason why I don't main TT anymore is because it would validate them if they mained MST, so I don't want to give them anything to use their MST on. But post side, if they do main MST, they'll probably side it out. So siding in traps is a good strategy in the Nekroz mirror post side, because back row removal will go out. However, again, I didn't want to commit a large number of cards for the mirror because there was nothing that I really wanted to bring in. Like, I don't find Emptiness and Mind Crush and stuff like that are powerful, but I don't see them as being like particularly amazing. So TT is in general very good, but it's very good in the mirror, and I just don't really see the need for much else. Like, bringing in 1 Kaiku and 1 TT going first and then going second, I think it's like Denko Kaiku in MST. Just 1 MST, by the way, is pretty good. So that's how it is for now. If I sound exhausted, it's because I'm pretty tired. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. I will be filming myself playing this deck because I can. I no longer have channel limitations and whatnot, so yeah, it will be a bunch of fun. But yeah, this is the build for now. I don't know if it will stay that way, but this is just with the TCG list in mind. So yeah, thanks for watching. This deck will be fun, and yeah, I'll see you around.